What's happening right now inside the Bears facility, in the meeting rooms, on the practice fields, and in the weight rooms, is nothing short of a cultural exorcism, a full-on identity reboot, a seismic shift that's quietly, and maybe even dangerously, transforming this once broken, chaotic franchise into something ferocious, calculated, and possibly elite. And the architect of it all is not a player, not a general manager, but a mastermind, a man who walked away from multiple job offers, who turned down safe gigs with easy rosters and chose Chicago, not because it was easy, but because he saw the potential to carve something legendary out of the rubble of years of mediocrity. And that man is Ben Johnson. And if you're not paying attention to what he's doing right now with this team, I'm telling you, you're going to miss the moment when the NFL begins to shift on its axis, because Johnson didn't come here to participate. He came to conquer, and he's wasting no time, no energy, and no breath on things that don't push this team forward. And what he's already put in place in just a few short weeks is nothing short of revolutionary, because if you thought this team was going to slowly warm up into a new identity, take baby steps, gently transition into a new era. Forget it. Burn that idea right now, because Ben Johnson came in with fire in his veins, clarity in his mission, and steel in his voice. And his first act wasn't to sugarcoat the past or give motivational speeches. It was to start building a training camp unlike anything the Bears have ever seen before. One where complacency gets exposed, where intensity is not a request but a requirement, and where mistakes are not quietly corrected behind closed doors but dissected in real time, often with a roar that echoes across the practice field. And how do we know this isn't just talk, just another coach selling the dream? Because we're already seeing it with how this team is preparing for the summer. Because Ben Johnson isn't scheduling joint practices with one team like most franchises do. No, he's doubling down. He's calling in not one but two high-powered playoff-caliber organizations, the Miami Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills, for a back-to-back gauntlet of joint practices that will act as a crucible for this young Bears team. And let me tell you, this isn't about publicity or preseason chemistry. This is about throwing your team into the fire before the season even starts, and finding out who's ready for war and who's going to break. And what's even more wild about this is how these practices are being structured. Because Ben Johnson isn't just bringing in any teams, he's bringing in two totally different offensive and defensive styles that are going to test every single thing about this roster from top to bottom. The Dolphins with their blinding speed, precision routes, and exotic pressures, and the Bills with their veteran toughness, layered offense, and cold-blooded situational mastery. And the question that hangs over all of this like storm clouds building over Lake Michigan is, will the Bears be ready? Will this young, evolving, retooled roster have the grit, the communication, the fortitude to take the hits, respond with discipline, and come out of those practices sharper, stronger, and more united than ever? Or will they crumble, expose their flaws, and retreat into the same old habits that doomed them in years past? And that's exactly why Johnson is doing it. Because he wants to see who flinches. He wants to see who gets overwhelmed. Because he's not interested in carrying passengers on this journey. Only warriors, only soldiers who can take a shot to the mouth and get back up laughing. And already, in OTAs, we're seeing glimpses of that mentality taking root. Because Johnson is not tolerating sloppiness, he's not patting backs when guys make mental mistakes, he's snapping at veterans like Cole Kmet for lining up wrong in no-contact drills, he's calling out missed assignments in front of the team, and he's doing it because he knows that if you don't crush bad habits in May and June, they become fatal flaws in October and November. And what's wild is that the players, they're not rebelling, they're not pouting. They're buying in. They're feeding off of it. They're waking up and realizing, this is what real leadership looks like. This is what it feels like when the standard is set so high, you have no choice but to elevate, or get out of the way. And that's why guys like Joe Thuney, who just got here from the Kansas City Chiefs, a literal Super Bowl machine, are already comparing this team's urgency and culture to what he saw in KC. And he's not saying that lightly, because that's a guy who's played with Patrick Mahomes, who sat in meetings with Andy Reid, who knows what elite process looks like, and now he's seeing flashes of it in Chicago under Ben Johnson. And that should send chills down the spine of anyone who's followed this team through the agony of the last decade, because that kind of validation, that kind of buy-in from a proven champion, tells you that this isn't just smoke. There's a real fire building inside this locker room, and on the defensive side, the tone is just as intense, because guys like Grady Jarrett, another seasoned pro with no time for nonsense, are saying straight up that this is not a feel-good program. This is not a player-friendly setup where coaches try to be your best buddy. This is a tough, demanding, high-accountability culture that reminds him of playoff teams he's been part of in the past. And you start connecting the dots between what the veterans are seeing, what the staff is enforcing, and what's about to go down when the Dolphins and Bills show up to Hollis Hall. And suddenly it becomes clear. This is not just a training camp. This is a proving ground. This is a psychological trial. This is Ben Johnson holding a mirror up to every player on this roster and asking them, are you who you say you are? Or are you just another name on a depth chart waiting to get cut? And I guarantee you players are feeling that pressure already. They're sharpening their minds. They're locking in, because they know Johnson isn't looking for permission to lead. He's already doing it. And if you can't match that intensity, if you can't survive the standard, you won't make it out of camp, and even players who've been here for years know the leash is short. Because Ben Johnson doesn't care about your draft status, your contract, or your reputation. He cares about performance, execution, and who shows up when it's hard. And that's why you're seeing even the established leaders like Tremaine Edmonds mention how the players are starting to mirror Johnson's fire, how the tone has shifted from quiet hope to militant purpose, because there's no time for slow starts, no margin for learning on the fly. Not in the NFC North, not when the Lions are rising, not when the Packers are reloading, and not when the Vikings are retooling with desperation in their eyes. And that's why every single rep against the Dolphins' speed, every single snap against the Bills' power, is going to matter more than most people realize, because those reps are going to expose cracks, reveal competitors, and ultimately determine who gets to wear that Bears jersey on Sundays when the lights are brightest. And don't forget, these joint practices come with layers of emotion too, because both the Dolphins and Bills have former Bears players on their rosters, guys like Mitch Trubisky, Deonta Foreman, and Larry Borom, guys who were once part of this franchise and now return with something to prove. And you better believe that Johnson is going to use that emotional edge to get his guys fired up, to make those practices mean more, to simulate game day stakes long before week 1. And when all of that gets compressed into 1 week, when intensity meets familiarity and physicality meets coaching precision, you don't just get better as a team. You get forged, you get galvanized, and if the Bears come out of those joint practices sharper, cleaner, and more united than they go in, then we'll know without a doubt that this team is for real. And we'll look back on this summer not as a footnote, but as the beginning of something unstoppable. So I'm telling you right now, don't blink, don't doubt, and don't sleep on what Ben Johnson is building. Because this is not hype, this is not fluff. This is the real thing unfolding right in front of us. And if you love this team, if you believe in what they could become, then buckle up, because the 2025 Bears are not tiptoeing into the season. They're marching, full speed, into a new identity, and they're coming for blood.